Welcome back to the class, everyone. Today I want to take a step back into our roster building style videos, and more specifically, I want to hammer down what some of the unsung heroes are of the game, that while they might not look like they're doing a whole lot on the surface, are doing a lot underneath. So first of all, just to kind of define our terms here, what we mean by some of these unsung heroes, there are just a handful of characters, probably more than that, in the game that are very blatantly good and awesome. We get to see them do very fun things. Dark Trooper is a great example of this. He has this huge punch move, it annihilates entire characters. Everyone loves to see it, it's satisfying, and we instantly think, Dark Trooper, good character. There's some tanks that will do similar things like Malik. Every single time you hit him and you crit him or put a dot on him, he ends up taunting, you get feared, you lose a ton of turns. Just looks like a really good character. Fennec Shand, very similar example, just kicks right through Lord Vader and everyone thinks she's super cool. Crew as well, heals constantly, and sometimes you just time out on him because you literally can't deal enough damage in single hits to be able to take him down. These are all examples of characters that are clearly good in the game. And again, as per the intro, I want to talk about some of the characters that we might not realize are actually doing a lot of things and pulling a lot of weight, but we need to give attention to them because when you're building a roster and you're trying to relic and gear things up, we can't neglect the support characters or the characters that have a support like role. So first off, I actually want to talk about Ahsoka Tano. She really does kind of fit this bill. Typically when you think of a JMK squad or a Qui-Gon squad, she's just not the first character that comes to mind. You're probably looking at a damage dealer like Cat or a Jedi Anakin that is a little more important, but the girl does so many things that change counters. Specifically, her basic. Her basic can dispel all buffs on an enemy, and it cannot be evaded if they have foresight, which means it can go through foresight and dispel it. And then on top of that, when she gets a critical hit, she dispels all debuffs on herself and another target ally. So the reason why this is good, if this were just a normal basic, it wouldn't be that important. But when you look at her Daring Padawan, a unique here, if the leader is Galactic Republic, which is very easy to do, that can be General Skywalker, that can be Qui-Gon Jinn, that can be JMK, that can be Padme, it can be General Kenobi. She has lots of options for that. It is called to assist whenever another Galactic Republic ally uses a special ability. So she's getting to constantly go, constantly dispel taunts, constantly cleanse the team. She does so many different things in just that little basic that add up onto things, and she does a lot of other cool things. She like her protective maneuver here, it's some good healing, it's some decent damage. Her stat gains are kind of nice, make her kind of hard to take down. So she's got some stuff going for her, but mostly what I wanted to look at is that basic and seeing how it does things to both the Padme, the JMK, and all those teams. Specifically with JMK, it's actually one of the reasons why JMK can get to his ult so quickly, because her constantly assisting and attacking out of turns does build that ult charge. The next one is going to be Range Trooper. Range Trooper, again, Dark Trooper's kind of the big guy on campus in that scene with the Imperial Troopers, but Range Trooper does something behind the scenes that just radically changes Imperial Troopers. And to understand that, we really have to understand Veer's lead. Veer's lead gives 10% turn meter whenever you gain a buff. Awesome. On top of that, Admiral Piet here, whenever another Empire ally attacks out of turn, all Empires gain the buff, the Emperor's Trap. What that means is, if we get a buff, we get 10% turn meter. When someone attacks out of turn, we get that buff. Range Trooper's unique means that while he's active, Imperial Trooper allies have a 50% chance to call another buffed Imperial Trooper ally to assist when they're using an ability during their turn. So what this means is, every single time one of the Imperial Troopers go, whether it be Range, Piet, Dark, Veers, whoever, and they use an ability, they have a 50% chance to call in someone to assist. And while that assist itself is okay, I mean, it might be good, it might be Veers, it might be bad, but it is now also going to generate more stacks of Emperor's Trap, which is more damage, more potency, which is going to in turn generate more turn meter. And this is how troopers can kind of get into that turn meter loop, where you literally just can't stop them if enough of these keep happening. And while it isn't guaranteed, if some of those assists end up being Piet's intensified firepower, he then calls in 2 more assists, and instead of getting 10% turn meter, you get 30% turn meter. And all that is happening because of Range's unique. If you don't have that unique, you're really having to depend on all those mass attacks, and once they're gone and you can't use them back to back because they're on cooldown, you can find yourself at a lack of turn meter, and sometimes your Imperial Troopers can't get the kill, and if they can't get the kill, they can't lock down the turn meter, and they can't win the battle. So Range, definitely very good there for that specific reason, just adds a lot in that unique. The rest of his kit's pretty good too. Next up is going to be Cal Kestis, and this character is so annoying, and sometimes you don't even realize he's annoying. He goes really well on both a Ray as well as a Seer team, and the big reason why, again, kind of a similar theme here, is on his unique ability. At the start of the battle, all online force users gain 30% max health and tenacity, and that within itself, it's okay. I mean, there's lots of characters out there that give nice stat boosts on their unique, somewhat similar to a leadership, that's okay. But whenever an ally is critically hit, they and Cal recover 5% health and protection. When you start to look at the huge health pools that characters like Ray or Seer or Malicos have, after all, you include all their bonuses, this is a massive pain in the butt. Sometimes all you have to deal against them is that 5%, or I guess 10% when you group in the health protection, and you end up doing more healing them than you actually do dealing damage to them. I found this particularly annoying when using Jedi Master Luke against Ray with Cal in it, because every single time I was calling someone out assist, they were regaining, like trying to get Ray down, and they were critting on that little hit, the one that does like 95% reduced damage. It wasn't getting her down nearly fast enough, and she just completely ripped apart my Jedi Master Luke team. So very relevant, unique, and when we put the Cal on the team, we don't really see all that much of what he's doing, and we have to recognize that this unique is pulling a lot of weight. It is changing calendars. It is making things a lot harder. Especially very nice for the current Seer team that is doing some super fun things in 3v3 GAC. Next up is going to be Newt. This one's kind of old, but very much still gold. So Newt Gunray, he has some okay things on most of his abilities. Honestly, the extortion is a very good thing under his own lead. It's an okay thing outside of his lead. But what I really want to hone in on today, where you don't really see what he's doing, is whenever a Separatist ally inflicts a debuff, they also deal 5% max health damage to the enemy. So the 5% max health damage is good. You want the 5% max health damage. That's important for killing your enemies and whatnot. But more importantly, what it does in conjunction when you're under a General Grievous lead is you are going to trigger the 2% turn meter that you are getting whenever you damage a target locked ally. Each droid and each Separatist ally gain 2% turn meter. So what this means is when B2 goes and the entire enemy team is target locked, uses AoE and applies buff immunity to those 5 characters that already had target lock, he's putting another debuff on them, which in turn is dealing more max health damage, which in turn is generating turn meter. And again, from a similar idea from our ranged trooper and the Imperial Trooper team, this is how you get those loops going, where you just can't catch up with General Grievous, because he's not just gaining a measly 2%, he's actually gaining 10% because he's hitting the whole team, and then when there's another loop in there of debuffs, he's getting 20%, and then let's say it was B2 in the example, B2 also just normally gives turn meter when he applies debuffs. So you just get this huge train of things going where everyone has an AoE, everyone has debuffs, and it just becomes massively difficult for the enemy team to catch up to Grievous, specifically because of Newt Gunray's unique ability. Again, his extortion is also really good. We're not going into detail on that quite yet. Next up is going to be Grief, and I don't think that anyone here would argue that Grief is a bad character. Everyone probably thinks that Grief is a good character, but I just don't see enough love when it comes to him. When people talk about like the Fennec versus Lord Vader counter, like, oh, Fennec is so good. Fennec is nothing without Grief versus Lord Vader. She has pretty much no shot unless you're like in TW and using Dad Bob Boba, and that, but in that case you can actually still use Grief, but IG-11 ends up becoming another option in that case. But for the most part, his sweeten the deal, this is the only way that bounty hunters can consistently dispel. I realize Bam has one, but it's not nearly as good, where he's being able to give retribution, health protection back, extra turn meter. This becomes of the utmost importance when you're fighting Lord Vader, and Lord Vader not only has to deal with you constantly cleansing everything that he's putting out, but he also gets counterattacked by Fennec when he hits her, and she does a lot of damage on that basic hit coming back on him and giving herself offense up. Another thing that is really cool that they put into his kit that I love is whenever Grief becomes inflicted with a debuff, his cooldowns are reduced by 1. So this, at the very beginning, kind of daunting cooldown of 5 really isn't that bad, because if the enemy is consistently debuffing you, it won't be 5. I mean, there's been times where I've used this literally back to back, because Lord Vader loops his turns around and gets, I don't know, 8 debuffs or something around that time. You can just keep cleansing and cleansing and cleansing, and then Fennec does what she does. And that's honestly just one example of where Grief and Fennec work well. Bounty hunters do not have an AoE cleanse, at least the typical bounty hunter team, like a Bosk or an Aura lead. They don't have an AoE cleanse, and Grief is the only way that they can really get it, and he becomes really valuable in that sense. Next up is going to be Talon, and again, Talon's probably similar to Grief in the sense that nobody would flat out call her a bad character, but I don't think people realize really how much she's doing behind the scenes, and I specifically do want to call out both this unique that adds like some max health, offense, and speed and stuff, which all that's good, but really the proven loyalty, this one is a big deal. Whenever the leader is damaged, all allies gain 5% turn meter. That's good. And the first time they would be defeated while Dark Talon is active, they dispel all debuffs on themselves, recover 100% health, 100% turn meter, and it functions as a savior-like mechanic that Jedi Knight Revan would have, who is a very good hero's journey character. The reason why this becomes important when you're actually using the character in GAC is because she's primarily used under two leads, Darth Malgus as well as Darth Traya, and those teams live or die whether or not you can kill the leader. Malgus is the tank, and he constantly forces you to target him because he cycles through his turns constantly and also has different ways to make himself taunt. So you're forced to go after him, and if you have to drag him all the way down and then have to kill him twice, it's one of the reasons why insta-kills are so nice versus him, because they don't have to worry about that. You can just bypass this whole thing with Talon, because if not, having to kill him twice ends up being a huge pain. And then on top of that, and I actually really kind of prefer her nowadays with Traya, because you can't just go right for Traya. You actually have to work your way around to Talon, and Talon stealths herself, so it becomes very hard for a non-galactic legend level team to be able to beat Traya with Talon in there, because otherwise Jedi Knight Revan can kind of come in and rush things and be able to take out Trey in one fell swoop, but he can't do that because if he tries, not only does the whole team become turn meter loaded, but Traya essentially not revives, but comes back to that savior-like mechanic. And last and certainly not least is going to be Rose, and this is like one thing that I realized for a lot of people is a hard pill to swallow just because the character didn't go overly well in the movies. But Rose has become a very important part for the modern Finn and Zori team. And the reason why, I mean, there's probably a few reasons why, but this is the biggest one right here. You'll physical damage target enemy and grant tenacity up for 2 turns to a random resistant ally who doesn't already have it. And the reason why this matters is because they put a very secret, special, whatever you want to call it, mechanic in Zori's kit that says whenever a resistance ally without tenacity up gains tenacity up, all other resistance allies without tenacity up gain it. And while they have tenacity up, this is key, they deal damage to an enemy, they have a 35% chance to inflict spose on an enemy for 1 turn. If you understand how Finn's leadership and Zori and all that, the rest of those work, they have to be constantly exposing the enemy so that they can reduce their cooldowns, so they can gain turn meter, so they can strip turn meter. The reason why this matters is because our good friends Resistance Hero Finn and Resistance Hero Poe don't have a single way to naturally deal and expose. And furthermore, through Finn lead, they can't even deal and expose on their own. They have to do this kind of roundabout way of gaining tenacity up from Rose, who then Zori makes it spread, and then even these guys are able to generate exposes 35% of the time whenever they do damage, which can end up being a lot because they have mass attacks, there's counters, there's a bunch of other things. And you really do want to be using, particularly Resistance Hero Finn, not just because this, but like look at his unique here, where all resistant allies have a 100% counter chance, 50% defense, and 50% tenacity while he's inspired. That's a leadership ability. And the only way that you can really kind of fit him into the team and excuse him is if you're getting this tenacity up cycling through, and he's not only being able to do all the things that he wants to do, but he's going to be able to do all the things that Finn and Zori want him to do as well by being able to gain exposes and whatnot. So again, Rose, kind of a weird, hard pill to swallow, but has become a very important character in the background for that new Finn and Zori team. So these are our unsung heroes or underrated characters. Not quite sure what to call them just yet. Let me know in the comments what other characters you guys think out there are also really good or maybe underrated. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, stay awesome.